it's what I've come to now know it as, and it's really allowing my life to flow. That it's looking at everything from the inside out, and I call that whole process nourishment. Yes. So I realized that in life, most people, including myself, weren't really getting fed.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Together, we'll explore practical tips, expert advice, and inspiring stories to help you overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Making small changes is possible and can lead to big results. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. Welcome, family. I want to welcome today Isabel Chiara. I got it right?
You did.
To the show. Isabel is the creator of the life actualization process, and she's been a guide, mentor, and leader throughout her entire life. With over 30 years of expertise in extensive studies and practices of transformational energy modalities, cool stuff, she unlocks the unlimited potential for her clients, which we love to hear, and helping them ignite their most liberated, passionate, and empowered life path, full of prosperities, miracles, and magic, which I am just excited and fascinated to get into and talk about. So, Isabel, welcome.
Well, thank you.
We
I love the whole idea of magic in one's life.
I do too. I can't wait to talk about how you view that and how that manifests itself for your clients, for yourself, how you see it in others. So we will go there. So I just want you to start with your focus and passions, where they are right now. And, I want you to talk about what you've created and give my listeners a little bit about who you are and why we are going to have an amazing conversation.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to meet you also. We have a lot of things in common, it looks like. So what are my passions? So my passion is, I have to say, is really working with others and removing obstacles from their life. And I created the life actualization process, which just does just that. What we do is we look at, and I actually just created an app to really transform that any kind of outworn behaviors in one's life. But what happens is I meet people and I see people and I can almost hear what their blocks are in the words that they speak, in their everyday wording. And my body goes, I kind of cringe. And I end up, going into actualization mode. And I actually try to help people see another empowering way to look at, an event in their life that's not working for them. And so this is where that's what floats my boat, really helping people to see that part of them. And so after so many years, I studied for myself too. I was going through the whole process myself. Having had a relationship with food that was kind of overwhelming for me, and it was my safe zone, right? It was a safety zone for me, and so I began looking at that in so many different ways, and I thought that leaving the body was actually the best way to be okay. Be safe in my life. And so, I brought myself through the process, and I knew the process was an inside out job. I knew it wasn't going to be, a diet, because I couldn't even stand a diet for 10 hours. That was never working for me, but it's what I've come to now know it as, and it's really allowing my life to flow. That it's looking at everything from the inside out, and I call that whole process nourishment. Yes. So I realized that in life, most people, including myself, weren't really getting fed properly. So as we are talking about food, the nourishment process that I discuss, and my app is, I have an app called the Nourish app, is really about the path in our life.
Mm.
And if we look at it as a, not a pill or a one and done kind of experience for ourselves, we're on this path and we don't even have to judge it as good or bad because we're on a path. And it almost makes it easier for us to say, oh, okay, well, wherever I am right now, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm okay. We have different words that we start to bring into our how we're describing the situation in our life. So being on a path of nourishment is where I'm totally, my passions are right now. I actually have a book coming out in a couple of months called Nourish. And I'm so excited. I'm excited also for myself and to share it with everybody that we don't have to keep making ourselves bad or making
Mm.
ourselves wrong, or we get to feel like the safety in our life. We get to
Mhm.
feel good about ourselves. Finally,
Mhm.
finally, just by saying that word nourishment is has become a mantra.
Mm.
It's
I
like it's almost like a movement in our life that we're shifting our behaviors because it's no longer, these good, bad, aren't going to be the way we make decisions.
mhm. I love that you mentioned about words, about how the words and what we tell ourselves matters and how we use the language and we
Right,
talk to each other. So I love this idea of nourish because when you think of the word nourishment, it's so much deeper. It's more richer than just saying, I feed
right.
myself, right?
And
You're
deep,
nourishing. It's
right?
like you're going deeper, deeper. Yeah, you mentioned something about relationship with food and safety with food. Do you want to unpack what that looked like in your life and that, where you are today with that and how, how you define or how people find their quote unquote safety in their food and
Right,
what that looks like for you?
right. Um, well, I think I need to go back to, my parents were very hardworking. I grew up in the restaurant business. We didn't really have a really beautiful kind of communication, especially at the dinner table. Everything was rushed and abrupt. And so my relationship with food became that. And my relationships became that also.
Mm.
Like when I would talk to people, I wasn't there to connect with them. I was really there to, here, let's get this done. Let's, it wasn't like a total connection. And including, I learned at an early age that I started getting into spirituality. So I learned at an early age to leave my body,
Mm.
so I wasn't even there, for if things were happening that didn't feel safe for me, I would just tune out. And I have to say that that's when we're growing up, as long as we have some kind of a strategy that allows us to feel safe, that was it for me,
Mm.
leaving my body. And I could do it, at any moment. Like it begins to become a habit.
Mm.
And, but I still knew that there were ways. I thought spirituality actually meant too leaving your body.
Mhm.
I'm going to go to the angels. I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to be out of my body to
Okay.
communicate, to reach them instead of reaching myself. So that's kind of what I did, and I thought that was like a good way to be. But from that, I learned so many things. I studied every modality known to man, Reiki,
Mhm.
theta healing, astrology. That was my passion and that was my interest.
Mhm.
And so, in order to culminate all of it, I think that, this Nourish is a good way to look at it. And it allows me a way to really coach others.
Mhm.
But I always knew I needed to have some kind of self acceptance, right? So that's what this whole concept of Nourish does. It allows you to self accept. But my goal was to get in my body. Of course, it took me a really long time. It didn't just happen overnight because I thought I was doing the right thing.
Mm.
So that was the gift that allowed me to be safe in my body.
So you
Yeah.
said you thought you were doing the right thing. When I hear that, it sounds like you thought you were doing the right thing. It sounds like it really wasn't quite the right thing. And then you found what
Right.
was better. You want to
Well,
elaborate some more on that, please?
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I thought the way to be was to not be in your body because then you could withstand anything. If anybody
Mm.
said anything, you could, move it, push it away. You didn't have to deal with it. So, I mean, it was actually that way that I was at that point was a gift, because it really protected me. Of course, you're kind of stumbling through life a lot, but we get to the painful moments don't feel as painful because you could just, kind of whisk it away on some level. But I knew the more I started, studying a lot of different modalities, and of course I would take myself through every process, and I, worked with many people. I could see myself leaving my body.
Mm.
I actually could feel myself when somebody was talking, I would leave.
Mm.
Like, and so I knew that the way in was going to be, a lot of internal processing.
Mm. Okay.
Uh,
Well,
yeah.
so what brought you to the realization of the connection between, like, because you're doing a lot of work around food, about helping people with eating habits, and um, you shifted your focus, from what I understand, to addressing this big challenge, and this transforming our behaviors and learning to heal, and it has to do with our relationship with food and this idea of nourishment. So connect,
Right. But
what brought you from there to here, and
because
what
that
you
was
learned.
right, because in my life, everything was working to a degree, except for I didn't feel comfortable with these behaviors around food.
Mm.
But when I talk about nourishment, I think the key thing to say here is that it isn't, even though I focus on the food, it's really not about food. It's about our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with others. And maybe it's a good time to introduce my app and talk about some of the
Sure.
things because it's actually going to a point where we're connecting with ourselves. And so, just to say, I have in this app, and it's called the Nourish app, that they're called activations. And there's a component where it's really an inner guided meditation. And but it brings you to an event in your life, and it allows you to bring in an inner guardian and your inner child and go back to the event and look at it with different eyes and really explore. And kind of what happens when you start to explore what was happening, you kind of start to begin to get your needs met, and you begin to start to transform that pattern, or just we become very conscious of whatever that pattern was. Like one of the, not to go into this right away, but one of my activations is called the sabotaging self. And these are the tools that I bring to the sabotaging parts of ourselves, and we bring it to consciousness. And that part of us knows how to nourish ourselves. And we can create a different outcome for ourselves as the more we, check into these these activations or these events in our life. It's really looking at self-diminishing behavior and self-sabotaging that arise from any kind of coping patterns that we do in our life. So the mere fact that we're listening to these activations, and it also comes with a write-up of what results you get from it and what that particular activation is. We actually get to let's just say you listen to it, we recommend listening to it twice a week. So it's not like it's not something that you have to sit there and do every day, but you get the pattern begins to you become very conscious of the pattern in your life, and it's so much easier to do. Like if you look at it from the inside and you begin to connect with those experiences, and the healing starts to occur because you end up taking a pause. We get to take a pause and look at it from different eyes. And this is how, it's kind of like therapy in an app.
In an app, yeah.
But the difference is with this type of work that we are actually, we could feel the shift. There's a healing component to it, like I just said, where we bring in parts of our inner self. And that makes all the difference in the world. And we're not imposing our will over ourselves, because our healing really comes from within. And it starts to mirror itself from the outside. You'll begin to notice people shifting around you and saying different things to you, and you're like, I have another activation that's called "What's in Your Inner Fridge."
Okay.
And it's really looking at like some compulsive behaviors around eating and going right to the trigger points. Because sometimes we're triggered by situations that haven't even happened yet. And we begin to get anxious, and we begin to get, like flustered, or, and all these feelings start to come up, and we don't see it outside of it. We don't see what's happening, but our body knows when something's different is going to happen. The unknown is about to show up, and our body kind of knows, and it reacts to some stimuli that's not even happening yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in many instances, sometimes 3 days before something's happening in my, at my work and my business, I start to react to something that I don't even know. I'm like, hey, now I know. I say, hey, what's going on? Like, and it's really a few days beforehand. Isn't that interesting how your body knows?
Yeah. So so if somebody is not as aware of their patterns and behaviors, and how would they know if there's something that's linked to food or not, or if they're nourishing their body or not? How do you, because you're talking about being enlightened and about having that connection above oneself, and
Right.
I understand where you're coming from, because I have practiced some of that, but all that was new to me at one point as well, where like you just don't realize that it's almost like having two of yous. There's two of you. There's the one that's actually going through the actual experience, and then there's the other part of you that is the observer to the experience.
Right. Well,
So
it didn't start out as a food pattern. None of this did.
Okay.
It really started out with just situations in our childhood. Like I have there's another activation that I called setting the table. I mean, I think most of our patterns around food have just started at the table. But it wasn't about it's not just about the food or us
Right.
eating. It's about,
The
you know,
experience
where was
that
our
associated
parents?
with the food.
Yeah, where were our parents? What did they say? What did they do? So I always have this vision that I spilled something at the table and everybody reacted.
Mm.
So now I had that anxiety around food because everybody's upset or angry because somebody spilled milk or I did,
Mhm.
right? So that's the visual that showed up in my head, and everybody
Mhm.
has a visual on that.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's why I created this particular one. I was like, what happened? That's like one of the first things. What happened at the dinner table? Like,
Mhm.
it could have been that you sat there alone or there wasn't enough food. I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah.
But all those situations, then the roles that our families had on our lives, it set us up for that dynamic that we created moving forward and the patterns we created. Maybe we said, oh, there's not enough food for maybe something happened at the dinner table and maybe you got a small portion, or maybe they said, oh, there's not enough food at the table. And now in life, which I have seen a lot of times, in life, we don't allow ourselves to have other things, not just
Mm.
food.
Mhm. Mhm.
We don't allow ourselves to have our needs. Let's just go there that deep.
Yeah.
So um,
How
this
can
is a very powerful one also.
Yeah, how can we catch ourselves? I mean, because it really is the practice of bringing things
Right.
from the unconscious to the conscious,
Right.
right? To have us recognize that we're actually
Exactly.
in self-sabotaging behaviors. So, what are your suggestions that you have, and how do you help others see their self-sabotaging behaviors that they might not see?
Well, we have to start from wherever they're at, and I
Right.
like to go deep right away. But I think that's why I created this app, because it's going into almost, I think I have almost every situation,
Mm.
even including relationships, including family dynamics, healing those family dynamics,
Hmm.
and also eating. How many people do this? They don't, like, I don't know why I'm eating. It's late at night and I need to eat. And it's a lot of times just like unknown
Right.
situations.
Right. It's a
So
habit. It's a habit. So how do you help how can somebody help themselves out of that?
right.
First, once you have the realization, maybe somebody's listening and going like, "Oh yeah, I do eat at night for no reason." Okay, great. Now I'm
Or
going
how
to
many
go do that.
All
But
right.
but
And
you
how
have
many people eat because somebody did something to them or said something to them?
yeah,
And
stress eating.
maybe they didn't even say anything, but I feel a lot of people that do have a food disorder are, just these patterns also are so sensitive that they can feel what
Hmm.
another person's thinking. And so now you're like kind of chewing on that, right?
Yeah.
And you're eating because you don't really know what it is,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You
I
don't know
would
what it is, but
stress
it's
eat. I
something.
figured it out. I was stress eating to avoid doing things. I would go and eat
Right.
because it was a delay tactic that I had.
Right.
It started, I didn't even realize it. And then there was one day I was thinking to myself, I'm like, why am I eating right now? I'm not hungry. There's no reason for me to eat. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. I have to go do a task that I don't want to go do.
Right. There we go.
Yeah.
This was procrastination in that case.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
100%. 100%. Now the situations are gone now where I'm not in that kind of stress
Right.
inducing situation, but um it went on for weeks before I realized
Right.
what it was.
Right.
Why do you think so many people struggle with
Because they
the
don't want,
healthy
because
eat?
nobody wants to. I mean, it's not easy to look at yourself. That's like the
Mm.
hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
And everybody would like to think that everything's fine. So food is a great indicator, or anything, alcohol, drugs,
Mhm.
anything's better than doing that thing you don't want to do. I just want to say that.
But isn't that, I wonder if that's just on the surface, though. I mean, if we dig deeper and ask the question, do we love ourselves? And cultivating that self love for oneself.
Right.
And instead of, being, I wonder if we can actually sabotage ourselves. We don't love ourselves, so we're going to abuse ourselves, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or
Right.
food.
Right.
What are some of your suggestions around cultivating self-love and compassion for one another,
Well,
especially when,
I
since we're
think
talking about
that's a
food?
great question. Well, I think that just we started to discuss this in the beginning, just acknowledging that we're on a path toward nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
Nourishment to me means, self-love, self-acceptance, joy. So if that's where we're going to, and I think it is, would behoove anyone to be going in that direction in their
Right.
life.
Who wouldn't want that?
Right? Who doesn't want it? But maybe there are people that don't. I don't really want to speak for people, but if they're listening to this podcast, they're ready to look at themselves from the inside out. And I feel like the app makes it really easy because it happens spontaneously just by listening to these a few times.
Mm-hmm.
And you start to become very conscious of the behaviors. I mean, it happens very quickly. And so that's why when I was working with people, I was bringing them through some of these activations and stuff. And I was like, I got to get this in writing because
Mm-hmm.
it's really important
Mm-hmm.
because they felt different.
Can you share
After,
some success stories of people that you worked with and that have used the app?
well, I'm going to talk family dynamics. How people, it's called Healing Family Dynamics, is the name of the activation. And it was a lot of relationship with their, parents, family. But what happens is we keep creating it outside of ourselves too. Like we
Mm-hmm.
create it in the workplace. So just drawing attention to where a lot of those things started from,
Mm-hmm.
and then going through how we choose what we choose to do when we're in a relationship and we feel frustrated and anxious and we don't know what the other person's going to do and or any behaviors. And really, I've had people who don't speak to members of their family. This is a really big one.
Mm-hmm.
Many times we've done some of these activations, and the parent would call them, or they felt like they needed to heal that relationship. They would call their parent, but it wasn't, okay, I'm going to call my parent now. It wasn't like that at all. It was something that happened spontaneously,
Mm-hmm.
and the relationships began to shift because we're shifting the way we look at and we hold things. So I feel like the relationship with others in our childhood and ourself
Mm-hmm.
are like some of the main crux. And of course, nobody's going to say, "Hey, I want to change my relationship with myself." Nobody's going to come in and say that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of where it almost gets to go.
What are some of the indicators then if somebody like, I guess the question is to bring it to their awareness. I'm really fascinated with this idea of unconscious versus conscious loving oneself, or
Yeah.
because if it's not on the conscious level, then somebody's unconsciously not loving themselves. What are some
Right.
outward manifestations that may show that somebody's not loving themselves, and or
Well,
does that make sense?
any of the sabotaging behaviors are like around
Mhm.
food. That as soon as we something happens with somebody, we're off to the races. We're on a binge. We're on a
What's a food sabotaging behavior? You mean like binge eating, or like
binge binge eating. I like to, or there's another thing that I noticed too. Like at a certain time of the day,
Mm.
that's when we eat. And it would be great to just look at what happened at that time of the day,
Mhm.
and that we begin to eat, on I call it like almost wolfing, where you're, where instead of connecting with, other people or going out, we kind of keep ourselves private, and we don't want to interact with people. I think that, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've created that kind of environment for people, where they are closing themselves up. They don't want to communicate. They don't want to talk to other people. They're not developing relationships. It's so important for people to connect with others. That's part of what brings us to a point of safety in our life. And the safer we feel, the better we feel. So that's a real, not allowing ourselves to feel safe, or even keeping ourselves in unsafe situations by the decisions we make. And we get to look at, why are we making decisions? That's like a real thing for a lot of people. A lot of people say, I don't know why I did it.
Yeah, let's unpack that. How would you respond to someone when they say, "Well, I don't know why I did that. I just did."
Right, because either they thought something good was going to come of it, they wanted to please somebody else, but didn't take into account their own feelings. So part of this is also getting in touch with how we feel, and that's what the work with a lot of these activations go to that point, and go back and curiously look at how we felt in those situations. And by knowing how we felt, we could bring those feelings, we could make sure that they're taken care of now. I think a lot of people spend their lives not knowing how they feel. That's very sad.
Yeah.
When you don't know how you feel, it leads to, I can't speak up for myself, or I'm not going to say anything. And we create this unsafe space around speaking.
Causes quiet and
And, so many
paralyzation.
people are able to, and we also create unsafe boundaries for ourselves with others.
We're talking a lot about taking care of ourselves, self-care, self-love,
Yeah.
nourishment. Again, I love coming back to that word, nourish, because it feels a lot calmer and more inviting than just say, hey, go take care of yourself. We're going to nourish. When you nourish something, you help it grow, you help it become more, you help it to be better. What are some suggestions that you would have for simple practices or tips that we can start with now, like to help us nourish our body and spirit?
I love that. Well, first of all, make that word part of your, like, something you say 20 times a day, including everything you're doing. Let's just say there's things that you don't really like to do, right? Find the nourishing aspect of that, because you're doing it. Allow your body to like, allow yourself to be nourished doing that. Maybe some people don't like to cook for their families. Allow yourself to say, oh, I'm going to nourish my family, or this is nourishing for me. I'm going to be creative. It will develop into other things. You're not going to just be cooking. Eventually, if you start to use the word nourish and you start to go down that path, you get to bring in more creativity in your life. You get to bring in more of your self-expression into that meal. And we know food has energy. And we are putting that, love and energy into our food. So that becomes part of how we integrate food, and we get to really digest it, right? Because it came from like a loving space.
I love that idea of food having energy, that food has energy. So when we talk about energy, there is positive energy, and there's also negative energy, right? There's or high frequency, low frequency. I guess it depends on what language you want to choose for that.
What if
So
we just say nourish?
yeah, well, that's what I mean. You're just
We
nourishing,
take the good and the bad out of stuff, so we don't have
right?
to. We can release judgment of our behaviors and have more self-acceptance.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, I see
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Well, there's a shift right there. It's
right,
really, yeah, what's good or bad, because what could be good to me could be bad to you. It's a
right.
matter of perspective and
Yes,
how you look at that. Oh, but I still love the fact that food has energy. So if you pour love into what you do, then it's going to have that. And I guess the
right,
opposite would also come into play. I mean, not that we want to necessarily go there for a while, but if food is around anger or if it's around arguing at the table, if that was something that
right,
people were used to growing up, that you're going to wind up with,
right.
you're going to wind up with that not feeling very good about nourishing your body around food. So I am assuming there is good news for us who have had experiences around food that maybe hasn't had good energy, um, that we can change our relationship and shift.
Right. Yeah, what if the people that were around your table and your family shifted in your eyes?
Hmm.
They became supportive, or I know this is hard for a lot of people, but eventually by looking at it differently and you changing and you're looking at from your mind's eye,
Hmm.
that they changed. Like there's another level of compassion, there's another level of self acceptance, and maybe the relationship with a father or men or mother and women shift
Hmm.
because some of the way you look at it and the way you held it
Hmm.
end up shifting. I think that listening to this, some of these activations,
Hmm.
and not putting pressure on yourself at all, but just listening
Right.
to a couple of times, just automatically shift. I also think that that in the morning, I love to I call it my prayer moment in my morning. And
Hmm.
I like to leave. I know so many people don't have the time, but I think the day goes quicker and more in flow.
Hmm.
It kind of moves in a beautiful direction. And when we are more conscious of what we're trying to create in our day. So I like that creation in the morning,
Hmm.
which is prayer. You're working with a higher spiritual realm for yourself, and you're bringing. I think that's where the point where you bring like miracles to your into your life, and you start to feel safe again, and it feels. I almost feel you feel happier.
Hmm.
Things start to look different around you.
Hmm.
People start to talk to you differently, and you are looking at them as resonating with you. Everybody starts to resonate with you eventually
Hmm.
because you're feeding your soul on some level. And I can't think of a better way than to spend that half an hour or 20 minutes with yourself and just kind of pray over yourself or kind of give yourself love, feed yourself
Hmm.
without feeding yourself food, but just feeding your soul good words. And I think the other thing is starting to notice when anything happens, when you go into the judgment, that you could replace the word judgment with, I feel nourished.
Hmm.
This is nourishing for me. And you own that for yourself.
Hmm. The
These are
role.
like so key. It's what I do. And it sounds like you do a lot of these things also.
I do. Well, I do in the morning. I do like to have a gratitude prayer upon waking. And lately, at least in my life, I just live in this state of gratitude and appreciation. And
Yes.
when you stay in gratitude and appreciation, what happens is you start looking at every circumstance through a different lens. So
Yeah.
even when something adverse, what would be perceived as adverse happening, something that would be, bad, whatever it is, I've started training my mind to go to, okay, this thing happened, but there's something good out of it. There
Right.
is something that you can find that's going to be positive for me, positive for somebody else, positive in some way affecting something. And when I have trained and it's training, it's almost like it's, for me, it was training to be grateful in all
Yeah.
circumstances.
I totally
And
agree with you.
once you start doing that every single day, then I just live. I feel like some days you just feel like you float through life or float through the day
Yeah, isn't it
for
funny how things
gratitude and
fall into place?
yeah, everything just, yeah, you're right. Everything falls into place. Let's talk about energy manifestation and magic. What do
Right.
those mean for you and how do they play a role in your life and what you've seen in the lives of others?
Right. Well, I decided at an early age I was not going to ask anybody for something, and I was just going to get what I wanted when I wanted. But I did make that decision consciously that whenever anybody said no to me, I would be like, oh, I don't have to ask that permission. I'm just going to get what I want whenever I want. Anyways, I had that belief inside of me that I was going to have this. I always had that as a child. Like, I'm going to have this magical life as soon as nobody's telling me what to do. So I actually, this is really interesting. I stumbled upon a woman named Shakti Gawan. She does creative visualization. Are you familiar with her?
No, never heard of her.
This is like in the 70s.
Mm,
And I took one of her classes. And so my whole life became about creative visualization.
okay.
And I was like, every time something went wrong, I would say, I'm going to just do creative visualization and everything's going to be great. So I think I became the master of that, because I trained myself. So, by what she does is she does this pink bubble technique where you put what you want in this pink bubble. And I remember one day I got in a fight with my mother and we didn't speak for like 4 days. I was so mad. And I started saying, okay, she's going to call me. You know what I mean? I created this whole thing where she would call me and I wouldn't call her because I would lose the game, if I did that. And my
Interesting.
mother called me like within 2 minutes.
Wow.
So everything that ever happened when I was doing, that kind of technique or when I was creating that technique,
Hmm.
I just started saying, "Oh my God, like miracle!" It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. So
Huh.
I've been doing it my whole life. I am not an author, and I have written so far 2 books and a third one on the way. Can I show you my
Wow.
books?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I have my first book was called Eat Your Words. Here
Hmm.
we go. And it's talking about the story of a person who's going through their life and they all the things they do with food, which is probably it's very funny. It's very funny. And then I have a second book which discusses a lot of modalities. It's called Bod Behavior,
Hmm. Mm.
and it's a journey to nourishment and self-love. So, but it talks about all these different techniques and it talks to therapists and people that do different techniques. One of
Hmm.
them is called havening, which, do you know the havening technique?
No,
Oh,
no.
that's an
I was going to
interesting
ask you, what's your one of your favorite techniques out of the book?
havening, and it's actually thinking about something and your feelings. You're thinking about a situation and your feelings, and you start to go like this uh, when you're thinking about it,
Hmm.
and it's more intricate than that, but it ends up shifting a part of your brain
Hmm.
and you don't have that charge on it anymore.
Oh,
So if
interesting.
anyone, Havening, I think it's havening.org, they're an unbelievable group of people, and
Mm.
they have techniques on YouTube, and it's great just to get the sting out of a lot of things that
Hmm.
have happened in one's life. Um,
Mm.
but I
Okay.
also
Interesting.
also think that if we look at every situation that happens and we say, "Wow, I don't really know why that happened," but I know it happened for me,
Hmm.
and I feel like, and I look at it as the universe is bringing this thing to either make you
Right.
stop, pay attention,
Right.
or take a new direction, right? We know that.
Yep. Know what that's
And
like.
we don't know what it is. Like, we don't know what happened. But if we put the energy of, okay, I know this is a, I now do this. I didn't used to do it, but I do it now. I say, okay, this is a good thing. I just don't know what it is. And my life could turn on a dime right now.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
I like telling myself there's something better out there. That's why this thing
Yes.
happened. And that was actually I worked with a life coach for probably a year and a half.
Uh-huh.
Radically transformed my life. It just absolutely put me into this other world that I didn't even know existed of myself. And I went in, I did a lot of self-development, a lot of work. And the one very early on, he said to me, Sue, he's like, do you think things happen to you or things happen for you? And
Right.
that honestly, that was the first time
Yeah.
I ever heard that,
Life
and blew
changing.
me away because I realized, well, if I said things happen to me, then I wind up playing a victim in my life. And I didn't want to play the victim. I have a very strong type A personality, and I'm like, but I did and had self sabotaging behaviors that would make me the victim of my life, if that makes sense. So, but when I realized, well, things are happening for me, not to me, it
Mhm.
shifted my entire focus on what was going on in my life. And
Right.
that you could take whatever's happening, that thing happening for you, and then at that point, you have a choice. You can use it for good, for your good and advancement, or you can sit and wallow in the low level frequency
Mm.
type of behaviors and thought processes. This isn't good for me. I don't know where to go with this. Things like
Right.
that. I don't even like speaking that stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
You take it to the next level and say, okay, this thing isn't, what do I have to learn from this? How can I make myself stronger in what it is that I'm walking through? Because this is happening for me. It's for a reason.
Yes. And Sue, don't you think that by us just saying, okay, it's happening for me, all of a sudden you're out of that frequency, which you were just talking about, and
Sure.
you're bringing in all of these new opportunities quicker.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, take losing a job. I mean, I did lose my job through a
Mhm.
series of events, and anybody. I'm not going to minimize losing a job. I mean, it is somewhat. It's hard to get fired, but it's sometimes it happens, right? For a number of reasons, not necessarily
Mhm.
mine. It was a shift in structure in the organization that I was with,
Or maybe
but
you weren't even aligned with the company
well,
anymore.
no, I was not aligned with a company.
Right.
That also was the case. And when I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? There's something better. There's something different. There's something
Right.
better. I to myself, there's something better out there for me that's more in alignment than
Uh-huh.
what this job was. And so it happened for me for a reason. I learned a lot out of it. I don't regret any
Right.
bit
You
of
would
it
do it
at
and
all.
you would
I
do it
was
again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would do it again. And would I do things differently? Of course, we all would. I mean, if, mistakes, it's how you view the mistakes, right? They're just mistakes. They're just opportunities to
Right.
grow and learn. And, I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio, his principles. And I think I can't remember if Jordan Peterson does it too, but there's variations of it where you fail, you grow, you learn, and it's kind of like this upward spiral. You fail at something, but that's okay. You learn from it,
Right.
you grow out of it, you get better at what you do. So every time you fall, you don't fall as much
Right.
as you
Or
did
you don't
before.
look at
Or
it.
you don't look at it as a
Oh,
failure. It's just
yeah.
an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity
Right.
to get better. What was one thing that you thought would be hard about confronting and working with? Let's go back to the food a minute. Like your
Mhm.
own working with food and your thoughts towards it, but wasn't. And then
Well, I
what
didn't
was
want
one?
to talk about it.
Yeah, and yeah.
I'm
And
hearing it
what was you
as
thought?
with you.
Well, what were you thought? Well, what did and then flip it? What did you think would be easy but wound up being more challenging?
Well, first of all, I can't believe I'm here now, right? That I'm even speaking about it, for the public to hear.
Mm,
Because I kept all that hidden, and like I didn't admit it, or I didn't want anybody to know.
mm,
I don't discuss it like that with my friends, but I'm sure they know. Um, so I think admitting it, but I think I had to wait till I had some kind of a path for myself. I don't want to say a resolution because it's you're always resolving different things. So I want to say and look at it like I'm on a path too. I don't say, "Hey, I have all the answers." I never say that, and I didn't even know I could say that. I thought if I spoke about it and I wrote a book that I'd have to have everything all figured out. But nobody wants to listen to somebody that has it all figured out, and I don't.
I like that you said path over resolution. Because
Yeah.
if we look at life as a journey and a path, then at least you know you're still going in a direction,
Hmm.
right? Because I find that if I set a goal for myself and I achieve it, there's nothing else above it. So I always go higher. It's like I like to run a race that doesn't have an end. You
Yeah.
just keep going,
Oh,
you'll
that's
get
interesting. I like that.
yeah, you'll get somewhere, or climbing a mountain. I use the same analogy. They're both kind of the same: running a race with no end or climbing a mountain with no top. You're just always looking for something else. But for me to have that perspective, it keeps life interesting and
Hmm.
it keeps you from becoming complacent.
Yeah.
Because and it's also, for me anyway, it sets up this really cool anticipation that there's something really cool tomorrow. Not that you can't enjoy today, because it does take some effort to be present in the moment for today, but it also gives you that expectation and that kind of like, okay, what's around the corner for me
Right.
tomorrow, and you keep
Yeah.
moving forward.
And I think all of you, I agree with everything you're saying, but I also think that when you're on this path, it becomes a more joyful path.
Sure.
Sometimes I find myself skipping. I'm like, why am I skipping today? It's really funny.
Yeah. If you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would it be?
Um, that you're gonna be okay, and and everything's gonna be good, and your life's gonna turn out amazing. And I kind of felt like I was going in that direction as a younger child, but I would wait till
Hmm.
when, but it was really about now. Like, had I said, like, now it's amazing. Now your life is amazing. So many times I would try to get rid of all the feelings and get rid of all the, you know, look at like, oh, I was in a victim role, of course. I think we
Yeah.
all start there. Um,
True.
it doesn't matter who your parents are. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter who's around you. We all have these circumstances. So, I looked at my life as, oh, poor me. But, thank God that was just another way of looking at our life then. And now
Yeah.
we don't need to. I always knew those words. We don't have to look at our life as poor me or victimized, but I didn't know
Mhm.
how not to do it.
Right, right, right. You get stuck in that
You
that
know?
that spiral that's, like, you play that victim. And I think, for me, it was having micro wins of being a victor in my own life.
Right, right,
And when you start stacking those wins and you start seeing the
right,
evidence that wow, I do have a choice. Everything is
right.
100% a choice. And that's sometimes hard for people to hear too, to make that
Hmm.
shift. Like,
Right,
everything is 100%
right,
on me. It is my choice. Regardless of what happens to me from somebody else, I still have a
right,
choice in my reaction.
right.
And when I started to embody that perspective, it helped me to move from victim to victor,
Right. But
because I
at
do
what
have that
point,
choice.
who knew who knew at
Right.
a younger age to,
Sure.
I never looked at victories. I
Yeah.
never
No. Yeah.
said, hey, good job. I ever, never
Yeah.
said good
No.
job.
That was me as well.
Now if I use the word nourish and I say, oh, that was nourishing, and I have that happy like
Yeah.
tone to myself,
Yeah.
that feels like wins to me,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Celebration looks different
Yeah.
for everybody, right? But I love this term nourish. I really do.
Yeah.
It's a very, very soothing word. even just when saying it, nourish, you're nourishing yourself, you're celebrating your wins, and that it is a form of nourishing your body. That's really cool. Isabel, we are coming down to this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it.
I
We're
enjoyed
coming
speaking
down to
with you
the end
too.
here. I have a couple questions I always ask everybody. What's here's in this one of my favorites. What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
I actually think you asked me all the questions and I was able to bring a lot of things into it. I feel like a lot of our principles are aligned. And I especially love the question that what's your morning routine? Like, how do you bring
Yeah.
that forward? And just for you to allow me to really bring that sense of nourishment to other people, I think you did a brilliant job.
It's a great answer. I've had a couple. I love asking that question. I've had a couple of those type of answers. We've hit everything, and that's great because
Yeah,
I know my listeners will walk away with something that they can, that
right.
they can use, right? And as we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Just use the word nourish in their life. Just anything that happens, say, okay, I'm nourishing myself. I'm nourishing myself. You're trying to bring a sense of safety into your life, a sense of self acceptance. So that's I think, key, for everybody. I also have a gift. I don't know if you know about that.
No,
No,
maybe, but yeah, no. Go ahead and say that.
okay. So you can I have a gift that for your listeners that they can sign on to my app and they get it free for a month. And I'll give you the code. I don't know if you got it already. And it's the Nourish app, and you get a free month.
Okay,
So I'm
great. It'll
excited
be
for
in the
everybody.
it'll be in the show notes. We will
Yes,
make
I'm
sure it
excited
gets
for
there.
everybody. And my website's called Isabel Chiara, Isabel Isabel CHIARA.com. And there's a lot of good stuff there. My books, a lot of, I think I have some podcasts set up there too. And I'm excited for everybody to get to know everybody.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to get into the app too. All right, so that will be there. Well, thank you so much for the gift of your time. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. It was an exciting morning too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, reach out to me and let's have a conversation. Until next time, love yourself, then love others. Peace.